Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today for our second time hosting Yulio's Jump Week, where we cover Yulio Jump, our cloud rendering engine for CET, Revit, and SketchUp over 3 days back to back. If you tuned in yesterday, you would have joined my colleague Nicole for our first session of Jump Week covering Yulio Jump for CET. And this session, of course, will focus on Yulio Jump for Revit. Tomorrow, if you're interested, at 2 p.m., Nicole will cover SketchUp. So tune into that as well. So today we'll focus on establishing a practical Revit to VR workflow and explore how integrating VR and AR into your presentations can truly enhance your client-facing process. So, some of you on our webinar today may be familiar with Yulio Jump for Revit and looking for a refresher, but others may be brand new. And that's totally fine because today we're going to cover a deep dive for everybody. Our main objective for today is to cover rendering for VR and AR using the Yulio plugin for Revit. And over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we'll also look at preparing your model for rendering and viewing and sharing your projects post render. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to enter them in the question box or the chat box, and I will answer all of them at the end of our session. So, before we jump in, my name is Dana Warren, and I'm the manager of client success here at Yulio and the host of your webinar today. My contact information is on the screen now, so if you'd like to follow up on today's webinar, please feel free to reach out to me. But I will also share it at the end of the webinar if you want to grab it then. And then lastly, if you do have to leave today's session early, I am recording the full webinar and we'll send it out to all registrants. So you'll be able to watch it later and you can even share it with your team if you like. Now, I find that VR experiences really help in immersing your clients in your designs and help them to understand size, scale, and flow much more effectively than 2D images or plans. It creates those wow moments and it just truly engages customers like never before. So, we're going to jump in and we're going to start out by talking about what Yulio Jump is and then how to use it. Now, before we do anything, we want to look at actually installing Yulio Jump for Revit. So, for those of you that are new to Yulio, Yulio Jump is a cloud rendering engine that can render your projects in minutes and can auto apply navigation and lighting enhancements to turn your model into a VR ready experience. So that's at a very high level. Of course, we're going to jump into kind of all of the different areas of Yulio Jump and what it can actually do. But at a high level, that's kind of the basics. Now, to begin rendering with Yulio Jump, you need to start off by installing the Yulio Jump for Revit plugin, which can be downloaded directly from the Autodesk App Store. The Yulio plugin is free to download. However, in order to use it, you must have an active Yulio license, whether that's a free trial, a standard plan account, or a customer enterprise account. It doesn't matter, just some sort of active Yulio account. Definitely grab the free trial if you have never used Yulio or Yulio Jump before, because you can try out Yulio Jump with that as well. With the Yulio plugin, you can render both 360 panoramas, stereoscopic 360 panoramas. So those are the files that you need for VR, as well as 2D perspective renders. So those are kind of the two different file types that Yulio Jump is creating. And I'm going to show you those in just a second. But I want you to note, and we're going to come back to this as we get into the webinar more, you can also create augmented reality assets using the Yulio Jump plugin as well. And these are augmented reality assets are items or kind of assets that you can actually place into your physical space and walk around them and place them and interact with them. So I'm going to get into that again a little bit later on, but just keep in mind at a high level, that is what you can generate through Yulio Jump. Now, diving in a little bit deeper, where is my image here? Just going to pull it up for you. It closed on me. So I want to show you the differences in the 360 panorama file and the 2D perspective render. So let me just find my file here, Yulio Jump and Revit. And here's my 360 panorama. Perfect. So on the left-hand side here, we have our 2D perspective render. So these are the types of renders that you're probably used to generating before being introduced to Yulio or virtual reality. So this is just your generic 2D perspective render. On the right-hand side here, we have our stereoscopic panorama, and this is the file that you need for VR. So whether you're rendering with Yulio Jump or Enscape or whichever tool you're using to create your VR content, this is the type of file that you're probably creating. We have a few different formats of panoramas or cube maps that are compatible with Yulio, which all of that information is available on our knowledge base section of our website. But essentially, this is the file that Yulio Jump is creating that's going to make up your virtual reality tours. So just to show you the difference, you can create both of these file types using the Yulio Jump for Revit plugin. And today I'm going to go through in the plugin and in Revit how you can actually generate both of these. So now that we've installed our plugin, again, you can get it from the Autodesk App Store. Just hit download here. Now that we've installed our plugin, I'm going to jump right over to Revit. And we're going to start to prepare our model for rendering. So this is the model that I'm working with today. And before you render, you're just going to want to think about how you might need to prepare your space. So for a virtual walkthrough experience, we recommend creating a fully enclosed building shell with 4 walls, a ceiling, and a floor. So regardless of how simple or how complex your model is, kind of at minimum, you typically want to have kind of those 4 walls, a ceiling, and a floor. You don't need them per se. Yulio Jump is not going to give you an error. However, you have to think about now that you're rendering for virtual reality. So your clients are not only seeing what's in front of them. So in VR, your clients will be able to fully explore your space. So having that building shell environment will definitely give them a more realistic and immersive experience. And then, not to get into too many details yet on the render settings, but the Yulio Jump lighting models are also optimized to work best in these types of environments. Now, we'll touch on lighting in more detail in just a couple of minutes, but just I want to start to get you thinking in that kind of VR mindset, right? And in kind of the way that the goal with VR is to fully immerse yourself in the space and tour the virtual environment. So what we're going to do first is I want to touch on creating your 3D views, because that's one of the things that we need to do before we can render with Yulio Jump is you want to make sure you have at least one 3D view created. So one piece of advice I have before you start creating your views is to think about the journey you would like your client to have while they're touring your virtual environment, and then plan out a little bit of a route. So for example, do you picture them entering at the front and moving clockwise throughout the space, or kind of in a straight line front to back? Think about your client actually like physically walking through the building or the space. And if you were physically walking your customer through the space, how would you do that? What direction would you take? What path would you take throughout the space? So think about that journey a little bit and then create your scenes accordingly, and make sure you're covering all of the different areas of the building that you want to highlight. So the views that you create here in Revit will be the scenes that make up your VR project in Yulio. Now, generally, we recommend that you place at least 2 to 3 scenes around your model. And that would be if you're working with like a much smaller kind of building envelope with just like one room. Well, a single scene, so only one scene, can give your clients an understanding of your space. It can leave a rather limited and stationary feel. So having more than one perspective gives your clients a more representative feel for your space and will help develop that impressive VR walkthrough. And I do want to note that the number of scenes that you create will totally vary project to project. So, again, smaller spaces may only require like 2 to 3 scenes. However, for a larger building map, you definitely want more. Maybe you're going to have 10, 15, 20, maybe even more. So, it really will kind of vary project to project and the different areas that you're trying to showcase and highlight within your space. So, within this building kind of shell environment right now, I only have 7 different views set up. That is not very many, especially considering how large this floor plan is. I would probably, if I was doing this with an actual customer, have more like 15 at least views set up around here, especially if you want to highlight some of these smaller offices or kind of collaboration spaces. So just start to think about that a little bit. And then what you're going to want to do is ensure you're placing 3D views around your space to kind of highlight all of the different areas. So to create a view, we're going to go to our desired floor plan that we want to create the view on. And then we're going to select the view tab. We're going to go 3D view and then select camera. Whoops. Try that one more time. There we go. 3D view and camera. And then all you're going to do here is place the camera where you want to create the view in your space. So just click to place it. And then you're just extending the view box there. And essentially you're just telling the camera which way to point. So do you want to point towards this little seating area or these little cubicle type collaboration spaces? And then just click it again to create your view. Now, one thing that I want you to pay attention to once you place that view is we're going to go over here to the properties panel and we're going to look at our eye elevation and our target elevation. So you can adjust these, and generally for VR, we recommend that you set your eye elevation to a standing height of about 5'6". It's a really good kind of average standing height for your typical VR walkthrough experience. Now, you can get really creative with it. We have seen users raise that eye elevation up to create like a bird's eye perspective of the space. We've also seen users lower it down and actually get underneath an object to show like the mechanics of it. We've also seen some users place that camera like right over top of a chair, for example, and then lower the eye elevation down to like a seated height just to, get creative with it and show off a different perspective of the space. But otherwise, you're going to want to stick with that generic elevation of about 5'6". So once you have all of your desired views created and just keep kind of repeating those steps to create additional 3D views, one thing that you can do is rename your views prior to rendering with Yulio Jump. So all you have to do is right click it and then just hit rename to rename the view. It will save you a little bit of time on the back end, and it also just allows you to get a little bit more creative with it. So you can definitely keep it camera 1 through 7. But again, think about that end experience. So we're going to look at Yulio and what this looks like post render in a few minutes. But just think about that end experience for your customer. Do you want them to be looking at your scenes and they're just labeled 1 through 7? Some users might say yes, because it's really easy to direct them throughout the space or guide them through that virtual tour. And then you can just like number off based on what scene they're in. However, other users might want to get a little bit more creative with it and have like fun or different names that are relevant to where that camera is actually placed. So it's entirely up to you and kind of the experience that you are trying to create with Yulio and with your VR experience. But just think about that a little bit. If you rename your camera views now, you don't have to do it later in Yulio, or you can always, render it as is for now and then decide to edit it later on in Yulio. You're never stuck. Okay, so now that we have created our views, One thing I want to do before we get into the actual Yulio plugin is I want to touch on lighting. So, Yulio Jump was designed to simplify the rendering process as much as possible and take complexities like lighting off of your hands. So, currently, the Yulio Jump for Revit plugin has 4 different lighting models to choose from within the plugin. We have Revit environment lighting, we have exterior, interior, and Revit neutral materials. And we'll discuss the benefits of each so you know which one will work the best for your project. And I'm going to show you samples of these as we go. So let's just open that up now. Okay, so the first method, and the one that we generally recommend using, is the Revit environment lighting model. So this lighting model will give you the best render result and will provide the most realism for your space. The Revit environment lighting model is the most advanced, and when using it, Yulio Jump will render any lights you've placed into your space and acknowledge them as light sources, meaning all of the lights that you have placed throughout your model will be on. Now, the only thing to note here is in order to use this lighting model, you do have to place lighting into your space. So just keep that in mind as I go through the different lighting models and kind of talk about how they work. So next up, we have the interior and exterior lighting models. These ones are great because they require minimal user modification and you don't have to worry about placing lighting in your space. So that's kind of the difference there. With the Revit environment lighting model, you have more customization, but you do have to place lighting. Versus the interior and exterior, you do not have to place lighting in your space, but you have a little bit less customization. Now, how I'm switching scenes here, this is one of our features called scene options. So it allows you to group different scenes together. It's just one way to navigate in Yulio. And it's really great for like doing a lighting study like I'm doing now, or to show off different configurations of the same space. So that's just one little tool I wanted to highlight as you see me kind of using them throughout the webinar. So the exterior lighting model, which we're looking at now, this one works best in an environment with a lot of windows or perhaps even a skylight. So the scene that we're in right now has a ton of windows, so that's why it's working well in this one. But if we go to an area of the space with less windows, it might be a little bit dark. This lighting model accurately simulates what would happen in the real world because it simulates an artificial sun with like a skylit or skybox type lighting model. This lighting model is more physically correct than the interior lighting model, meaning that any shadows or projection in your scene will look more realistic to your brain because the exterior lighting model is literally simulating how light moves through the real world. And then switching over to our interior lighting model. So this one works really well in an environment with very few or no windows. So this lighting model produces an artificial light source within the space and artificially adjusts the lighting so the space will be evenly lit. So you can see when we're comparing it to the exterior lighting model, especially in some of these back offices, just look at the difference as I go back and forth. It's a lot darker versus this interior lighting model is ensuring like a balanced light source throughout the whole space. So what this one is doing, like I said, it's producing that artificial light source, and then it's artificially adjusting the lighting so that the entire space will be evenly lit. So again, this one will work in a space with fewer windows, especially in some of those like darker rooms, versus the exterior lighting model is not going to work as well in some of those other spaces with less windows. And one thing to note about both of these lighting models, so interior and exterior, is that any lights that you have in your space will be ignored and replaced with one of these two lighting models. So you can see here, your lights are there and they're rendered as objects. However, no light is actually coming from them. So they just appear as though, it's a regular object or maybe even off. And in some cases, this is really, really great because you don't have to worry about adding any of your own lighting. So, especially for use in some of those earlier design development stages, it could be really, really beneficial. But for that more realistic render, I do think the Revit environment lighting model is the way to go because it acknowledges your light source and gives you more customization over the lighting in your space. Okay, and lastly, we have the Revit neutral materials lighting model. So this one essentially is like a neutral mode. And this lighting model is really great because it allows you to focus on making design decisions faster by removing all those materials and finishes. It allows you to focus on making those spatial decisions faster. So as you can see, when you select this lighting model, all materials, textures, and finishes that you have applied will be ignored and replaced with a neutral tone. So sometimes when you're trying to make those, quick decisions about spatial elements, in this case, we have a lot of furniture, but maybe it's just like where walls will be placed or, something more general like that. But sometimes your end client can get distracted on like the color of a wall or the finish on a piece of furniture, whatever it might be. So having this neutral material model kind of eliminates all of that and allows you to focus on some of those kind of more general spatial decisions if needed. So now that you have an overview of all four lighting models, you should adjust your model accordingly before you enter into the plugin. So if you're using that Revit environment lighting model, just make sure you have lighting throughout your space. Depending on the size of your model, though, Yulio Jump really only takes a couple minutes. So don't be afraid to try each lighting model, especially when you're starting to work with a new model for the first time and using Yulio. Don't be afraid to render like one or two scenes just to get started and see how the lighting model affects it. But I will say, as you start to use Yulio more, you kind of get a sense of like what works and what you like best. So especially when just getting started, don't be afraid to like play around with things and test things because the rendering time, again, depending on the size and complexity of your model, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes, is generally pretty quick. Okay, so the next thing I want to mention before we jump into the Yulio plugin, which we're going to do next, is we're going to talk about AR tagging. So this is creating augmented reality assets. So if you don't already know, which I mentioned it earlier, but Yulio offers fully automated augmented reality publishing directly from Revit. So this is an optional enhancement to your VR project that lets you incorporate an AR hotspot into your VR experience. So for your clients, this means that they can see project elements like furniture, feature walls, light fixtures, whatever it may be, in full 360. And they can also take it one step further by using their VR headset, phone, or tablet to see how the element looks and fits into their own physical space. So, to export augmented reality assets and have them be created as AR hotspots in your VR project, you need to first tag the items in your model using Yulio's AR tagging convention. So all you need to do is select the item or items that you would like to create as an augmented reality asset. So all you do is click on it. If you want to group multiple items together, just hold down that control button and select the items that you'd like to include in your group. So you can do one single item, or you can, like, we could group all of these items together if we wanted to. So I have a table and a chair right now. And then as soon as we select those, all we're going to do is come up here to this create group button and click on that. And then we're going to enter in Yulio's AR tagging, like naming convention. And you do have to be pretty specific with it. So the tag is hashtag Yulio AR. And then we're doing equals. And then you can label this whatever you like. Just make sure the label isn't like the exact same as another AR label that you have in there, but you can call it table and chairs or table, seating area, whatever you like. I'll just call it table for now. And then we'll just hit OK. And now those two items are going to be grouped together and rendered with my VR project. And Yulio is actually going to automatically generate this as an AR hotspot in my project. So to some of you, you might be like, what the heck is she talking about? We're going to get here in a few minutes. We're going to actually take a look at this project rendered in Yulio and look at the AR hotspot to see exactly what I'm talking about. And you can repeat these steps as many different times as you like. If you want to tag another object, just go ahead again and click it, create group, and then enter our naming convention. And you're not limited to like a table and chairs, for example. We had one user who did like a full live feature wall. And they actually they tagged the whole thing as an AR asset so their end client could actually like picture it and see it in their space or just see it kind of in AR to see if they liked that or not. And then we've had other customers who have done like a full gazebo or pergola. So you're not really limited. I encourage you to kind of try things out and explore it a little bit more. But just note that's the general process, regardless of what kind of asset you're tagging. We do also have guidelines for Revit on augmented reality assets on our knowledge base. If you ever want more information about that, or if you have like a quick question, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or our support channel. But we have a lot of really great content on our knowledge base here as well. We have a full section on Yulio Jump for Revit. So definitely check that out for those AR guidelines or any other kind of quick Revit things you might want to reference. Okay, so now that we've set up our camera views, we've tagged our optional AR models, we are ready to render with Yulio. So to begin, we're just going to select the add-ins tab here and then click on Yulio Jump. We're going to ignore that. And our plugin will open. Now, the first time you use Yulio Jump, you will be prompted to enter your login information. This is the same login information for your Yulio account. Essentially, it's just verifying that you have an active Yulio license. And then once you're in here, these are all your options for settings. Now, company, you can ignore this one. You'll be assigned to one company within Yulio. Next up, we have our render with option. So you can select Yulio Jump or Yulio Jump Perspective. This is the same rendering engine, the exact same process. The only difference is the file type that Yulio Jump is generating, which I showed you at the beginning. We have our 2D perspective render or our panoramas for VR. So for the VR experiences, these will be sent directly to your Yulio account whereas your 2D perspective image, that will be emailed to you. So we're going to start out by selecting Yulio Jump to create our VR project. And then next up here, we're selecting the lighting model. So there are the 4 lighting models that we discussed. All you're doing now is telling Yulio which one you would like to render with. Here, where it says select Yulio folder, you will select the folder within your Yulio account that you would like to upload the project to. So I'm just going to select Yulio Jump for Revit. This folder does have to be pre-existing in your Yulio account. However, if you upload the folder to the wrong place or it's not created yet, it's not a problem. It's really easy to organize your experience directly in Yulio. So if you upload it to one folder, you can always move it to a different folder later on. And then select scenes. All we're doing here is we're selecting which camera views we would like to render. So you can choose to render all of them if you want. You can just select a couple. That is entirely up to you. And then next up here, we have some project enhancement settings. So this add navigation hotspots box, by selecting this and checking it off, Yulio will auto-generate navigational hotspots for your project. So you can move scene to scene when viewing in Yulio. If you prefer to do it manually, you can always add them in later, but essentially this is Yulio's form of like point-to-point navigation and a really kind of natural and intuitive way to move throughout a VR experience on a computer in browser mode or on a phone or tablet or a VR headset. Next up here, if you did tag any AR assets in your space, you'll want to check off this box so they're rendered with your VR project and sent directly to Yulio. So just make sure you have that checked off if you did tag any AR assets. And then this add floor plan option will upload your chosen floor plan to your VR experience in Yulio. And this is really helpful to allow your viewers to orient themselves in the space. The floor plan will contain markers with all of the scenes that you've selected to render. So you selected them right here. And essentially in the end product in Yulio, again, we'll look at this in a few minutes, but your users will be able to navigate not only using the navigation hotspots, but also using the floor plan as well. Now, any floor plan in your project can be used. However, the cameras selected for rendering do have to be within the boundaries of your selected floor plan. So if one of those cameras is outside the floor plan boundary, you will receive an error. A couple tips for floor plans for best results. You can enable the floor plan's crop box so that the size adjustments can be made accurately. And then we also recommend using either like the shaded or realistic style in the floor plan's graphic display menu, which typically yields like an aesthetically pleasing result in Yulio. And then the last box here, automatically send this project to your headset. If you check that off, it will automatically send the experience to your headset gallery, which means it will automatically be loaded onto any VR headsets that you have connected to your Yulio account. And then once you have kind of set all of your preferences, generally like the first couple times you use Yulio is going to be the most time consuming, but Yulio will remember all of your preferences. So you don't have to redo all of it. If you just want to kind of run render after render, it will remember your preferences. So you don't have to redo everything. And then you're just going to hit the create project button. Now, time to process and render will depend on the size and complexity of your project. So to give you an idea, I know I mentioned rendering time a few minutes ago. A smaller project like this one here should only take about 5 minutes to render. And that's considering I have my AR assets, I'm rendering, well, regardless of the number of scenes, but generally I'm rendering 7 scenes. For this one, with my navigation hotspots and my floor plan, it generally only takes me about 5 minutes to render this project. But regardless of when your VR project is ready in Yulio, you will also receive an email notification from Yulio to let you know that the render is completed. And then, like I said, if you rendered with Yulio Jump Perspective, those 2D renders will actually be emailed to you where you can download them. Now, let's just look at this really quickly. If I selected Yulio Jump Perspective, you'll notice that all of those enhancement options go away because those are all related to the virtual reality experience, like the navigation hotspots and the floor plan and all that. If we select Yulio Jump Perspective, really the only customization we have here is selecting the lighting model. So our render will look consistent across the 2D perspective option or the panorama option for VR. And then you can also select the scenes that you want to render to be your 2D perspective images. So you can see the differences again when you toggle back and forth between Yulio Jump, which is for your VR experience, or Yulio Jump Perspective, which are your 2D perspective images. Okay, now I'm just going to exit this. I have pre-rendered the project so we can take a look at it together. We don't have to wait for it for the 5 minutes to render. So this is what my Yulio account looks like. I'm always dumped into my projects page here when I first log in. And then I have all of my folders where I can organize my projects on the left-hand side here. And this is my experience that we just essentially rendered. It's the same project. And then I'm just going to start off by viewing it in browser mode. So by selecting this view in 360 icon here, it's going to open my project in browser mode in a new tab. So it will open it just like this. However, if you click into the project here, you'll land on the edit project page. So every project in your Yulio account has a space that looks just like this. And this is where you'll see all of your project assets and additional enhancement assets like audio, images, videos, those AR models if you chose to render them, as well as your floor plan. We have additional webinars that cover like specifically enhancing your Yulio projects. So if you're interested in a deep dive on those topics or how to add all of this additional enhancement content to your projects, definitely sign up for one of our next webinars. We have one on June 4th. And then actually on June 26th, we have a Yulio user who's been a long time user of Yulio, who's actually joining us to share their experience with Yulio. So I think that'll be really awesome. And I'll share the sign up link at the end of the webinar. But if you are looking to sign up for one of those, it's just try.yulio.com/webinars, and you can see all of our upcoming ones. We definitely will have more throughout the year. We just have it updated for the summer schedule right now. Okay, so while viewing our project in browser mode on a computer, you can click and drag your mouse around to look at the space. If you're using a touch screen device, you can use your finger to kind of hold and drag along the screen to view the project. And as we're looking around our space, you'll notice our solid circles here. These are our navigation hotspots. And then we also have our auto-generated augmented reality assets here for all of the different objects that I tagged. Now, our navigation hotspots, we're just going to click on them to move around the space. And again, this is the same regardless of if you're viewing on a tablet, a phone, or in an actual VR headset. The controls are kind of the same. So you're just activating those solid circles to move around the space, or like activating the AR hotspot to view the AR asset. Now, if you also had Yulio Jump create a floor plan, you can activate it by clicking on this button down here. So this is the floor plan icon in the bottom left-hand corner. So we're just going to click on it to activate it. You can see all of the markers that represent our camera positions. So these are the views that we set up, the 3D views that we set up in Revit. The marker highlighted blue is telling us where we're currently standing. And then any of these other markers we can navigate to just by clicking on them. And we can always go back home just by clicking on the home icon down here. Now, really quickly, I want to show you the hotspot editor in case you want to make adjustments to your auto-generated hotspots. So again, all of these were auto-generated directly out of Yulio Jump for Revit. Same thing with the floor plan here. If you ever wanted to make adjustments to like the size, the placement, the label, you can always do that post-render. So you're never stuck with anything if you didn't like the placement or the label or anything like that. If we go back to our edit project page, you'll notice this hotspot editor button in the top right-hand corner. And when you click that, this is where you can kind of edit or customize everything within your experience. Again, also, if you uploaded any of that additional enhancement contents that we were looking at on the edit project page, so the audio, the image, the video, you can add all of those hotspots right here in the hotspot editor as well. So you'll see all of your different areas here for editing. And again, if you do want to join that June 4th webinar, we cover the hotspot editor and again, enhancing your projects in great detail. I do also want to mention viewing in VR. So viewing in browser mode is a great experience. So browser mode is again on our computer here, but it isn't true VR. So viewing in a VR headset provides that immersive experience because it feels like you're actually standing in the space. We recommend the Meta Quest headset to view in VR as it offers the best viewing at an affordable cost. And then once you have your headset, you can connect it directly to your account through the headsets tab here. You can see which headsets are connected to your account and then also manage which projects are on it. You can have 20 experiences pre-downloaded onto your headset. So if you ever didn't have Wi-Fi or internet connection, you can still view those 20 experiences offline. And sending projects to your headset is super simple. You just navigate to the project and then click add to headsets, and it'll be sent right away. Now, going back to our experience for a minute, while we're talking about kind of viewing and viewing in VR, I want to touch on viewing our AR hotspots. So, you can view your AR hotspots on a phone, tablet, or computer. However, in my opinion, the best viewing experience for AR hotspots is on a MetaQuest headset. So we're going to look at both right now. In browser mode, to view an AR hotspot, you just have to click on the hotspot. We're going to ignore this for a second, but I am going to come back to it. And now, really the only capabilities you have on a computer in browser mode here is kind of rotating the object, getting up close to it, looking around, which is, again, it's a good experience. But the next level of viewing would be by using your phone or tablet. And this will allow you to place the AR model in your physical space. So if you're viewing the AR asset on your computer already, we can open up this QR code, which will allow you to scan the AR asset QR code, and it will open up directly in your space. Now, so if you want to do this right now, you can actually just use your phone or tablet to scan the QR code on the screen, and it'll open. All you have to do on your phone is open the camera app, point it at the QR code and scan it, and then it will open it. It will open the model directly into your space. I am going to show you what this looks like, though, just in case you are not able to do that right now. So in this case, what I'm doing here is I'm viewing the experience on my tablet already. So the way that you can get the AR content to your phone or your tablet, you can do it in kind of two ways. If you're already viewing the experience like I am here, just click on the AR hotspot to open it. Or if you go back and scan that QR code, it will open up the AR asset automatically. So let me just play this again. So regardless of how you open it, this is kind of the next step. Yulio is going to first start out by scanning your space. So it just tells you to point your phone towards the floor and move it around a little bit. And then from there, your object is going to appear in your real world environment. So this is all augmented reality. So you can walk around it, you can bring it up close, you can adjust it to fit it in your actual space. So it's a really, really great experience, again, on your phone or your tablet. But my favorite way, like I said, to view the AR hotspots is using the MetaQuest headset. So it's a lot like the phone experience. However, it's just a lot more realistic and immersive. You can still place it in your physical space using the headset cameras, but you can also walk around it. You can bring it right up close. You can rotate it. So this is what that looks like. So this is viewing my VR experience in the MetaQuest headset. I'm going to go ahead and activate that AR asset. And again, it's going to load it into my actual physical space. And then using my headset controllers, I can rotate it, I can lift it up, I can walk around it, I can change the environment that I'm viewing it in. So obviously the one we're looking at right now is my real physical world, but if I did want to view it in a virtual environment, we have a few default ones that you can toggle between. But again, the VR headset is just a really, really cool experience. And a great way to allow your clients to visualize elements without having to go and fully mock it up or build it out for them. Using AR is a great tool to kind of speed that up and work around a costly physical mock-up. Okay, and lastly, before we end off today, I just want to touch on a potential workflow if you're using a different rendering engine to create your 360 panoramas for VR. So we have quite a few Yulio users who prefer Yulio for our sharing and enhancement features, but we do have some users who want to use a different rendering engine. And one of those groups of users we have are those users who also use Enscape in tandem with Yulio to create VR experiences. And the best part of using Yulio and Enscape is how Yulio makes sharing large projects convenient and easy through our Yulio URL sharing. And our extensive line of enhancement features, both of those together really allow you to take your experience to the next level. So I'm just going to open up and show you a bit of a comparison of Yulio and Enscape. So the way that our Yulio and Enscape users are using them together is that they use Yulio to create the bones of the experience. So you get this experience that you can fully navigate with your hotspots, your AR assets, your floor plan. But then you can upload your rendered 360 panoramas to Yulio using the Yulio replace function. So what that looks like on our edit project page here is it's just like this. So it's essentially just going to swap out the source files, allow you to keep all of your navigation hotspots, your annotation, all analytic data, any markup, and it's just going to swap out those source files. So this allows you to take advantage of Yulio's seamless, like presenting, sharing, and enhancing features while using the rendering engine that you may already know and love. Now, I do definitely recommend still trying Yulio Jump as an alternative for an all-in-one solution, but just note, I just wanted to share that use case of how some of our users are using them in tandem if you did want to explore that avenue as well. Okay, and that will wrap up our Yulio Jump for Revit webinar. I know that was a lot of information to take in a short amount of time, but I hope that you were able to learn a little bit more about Yulio Jump and how it can seamlessly fit into your workflow. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. If you do have any questions, it's not too late. You can go ahead and submit them in the chat box or the question box there. I'm going to stick around for the next couple of minutes to answer those. And then, as a reminder, if you do want to book an additional training session with me on anything we didn't cover or anything you want to go through again, my email is up on screen. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and I'll gladly work with you to set up a time for us to meet. And then also just don't hesitate to reach out if any questions pop up later that you might not think of now. And then if you did want to visit our webinar schedule, again, here's the link for that. Just try.yulio.com/webinars. Okay, thanks again, everybody. I'll stick around if anyone has any questions, but otherwise, thanks for joining. Okay, so we have one question here. Can I add a password? So that's a really good question. You can't add directly a password to your project. However, we have quite a few alternative methods for sharing that are actually a lot more secure than adding a password. Um, Typically, we've said that it's as easy to share your project URL as it is to share the password along with it. So we have kind of more secure methods for sharing. One of those, if you go to your project settings, you'll see this project view permission. So we have public or private. If it's public, it means that anybody with the URL will be able to view the project. If it's private, it means that you must be a logged in member to your Yulio account in order to view the experience. If this was marked private and I tried to share it to somebody outside of my company account, they would get like an error message essentially. Now, that being said, if I wanted to share this with a customer, what I could do is I could still have my project marked as private, and then I could go over here and set up a client gallery for my customer so that it gives them a space they can log into to view the private project. So essentially, you're just going to go create a gallery, and then you're going to create an individual gallery and add the private project to it. Now, again, if you want to join our June 4th webinar, we will cover more about client galleries there, but just keep in mind, we do have this as an option for protecting your projects. And then again, on our knowledge base here, so resources and knowledge base, we have a whole section that's dedicated to project security. So this will walk you through the method that I just mentioned, as well as a couple other ideas for protecting your projects. So definitely take a look at that. Okay, I have another question here. Can I make edits after it's rendered? Great question. Yes, you can. So it's kind of using that replace method that I mentioned in reference to Enscape. So if you wanted to make edits to a project after you've already rendered it with Yulio, that is no problem at all. You can edit your project at any time. One thing I always like to mention is that there's no like undo button in Yulio, so everything kind of saves and updates automatically. So just make sure, like, if you're editing a project and you're not sure if you want to keep those edits or not, always create a copy of the project, and then you can play around with edits on the copy before affecting the original. So that's a really helpful tool. And then in terms of editing a project that you've already created, let's say that so I've rendered my full project here with Yulio Jump. If I wanted to make edits to one scene, for example, so to camera one, what I would do is I would go back to Revit, I would open up my plugin, I would re-render the scene or scenes that I've edited. What that's going to do in Yulio is it's going to create it as a new experience. So now your barrier is, how do I get my new experience into my old experience? Or my original, I shouldn't say old, my original experience. So what we're going to do, let's just pretend this is our new one. We're going to go to our new experience where we've re-rendered two scenes. We're going to download those to our computer. This downloads, it doesn't like suppress the quality or anything like that, so don't worry about that. And then we're going to go over to our original experience, and we can upload these to our original in two ways. We can use this replace function. Again, that will just swap out the source files, make sure it's kind of like a similar camera perspective if you're doing that, because again, it's keeping all your navigation hotspots. But you can also uncheck those boxes. So if you don't care to keep any of that, you can just uncheck them. Or the other way to upload that file is as a brand new scene. So if you just upload it here under the like upload box, it's going to upload it as a new scene to your experience. So a couple different ways that you can make edits after it's rendered. And then in terms of like adding hotspots or enhancement content, you can do that at any time. Okay, and I see one more question here. Can I add a logo to my account? So yeah, adding a logo to your account or your projects is a great way to kind of customize your experiences. So when you send an experience to a customer, your company logo can appear before it loads the project. So company administrators can just click on your email address in the top corner and then go company settings. And then you're just going to go in the middle here, custom branding. And this is where you can upload a logo to your account. So again, once you add a logo, it will load before every single VR project that you share from your account. Okay, that is all the questions that I see right now. I'm going to stick around for a few more minutes in case anybody has anything else. Feel free to enter it in the chat box.